Okay, well, good morning again. We're just so happy to see everybody so early on a Saturday morning. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy day to join us for this very important conversation about our beloved Mills College. I wanted to also thank actually all of our supporters for your tireless hours of work and your very generous financial support to keep the fight going. Your faith and hope in us is appreciated. I would like to take a moment to introduce myself. If you don't know me, my name is Cynthia Mohud-Levin. I'm president of the Save Mills College Coalition, and we have a number of our Save Mills College Coalition leadership team here today. So thank you for being here. We're so appreciative. If you have not already gotten onto our newsletter distribution list, please sign up on our website at savemillscollege.org or email us at savemillscoalition@gmail.com. To allow us to continue our legal fight with the California Attorney General Rob Bonta, we still need to raise further funds. Tax-deductible donations can be made through our website. I'd like to introduce our esteemed speaker now, who has volunteered his time to assist us in this cause. Matthew Hendricks is an associate professor of economics at the University of Tulsa. His research includes trends in labor economics and education policy. He has been published in the Journal of Public Economics and Economics of Education Review. He has a personal mission to analyze the financial picture of colleges across the country and increase awareness about peculiar spending patterns in higher education. Because this presentation is being recorded, we know that some that are present here do not like to be seen in recordings. So please type any questions in the chat window as a message directed to our co-host, Adrian. The questions will be compiled and read to Matt during the Q&A. When Matt is done with his presentation, if you want to ask a question, you can then use the raised hand feature and we'll call on you in order. We do ask that you only ask questions and please do not give statements so that we have time to go through as many questions as possible, as we really do want a very robust conversation. Without further ado, I will turn it over to Matt. Thank you, Matt.
Well, thank you everybody for being here. We have 57 people on a Saturday morning on the West Coast. So it's great. I mean, this is really why I do this kind of work. I'll explain more about that in a second, but let's do some logistical stuff here. You can follow along with the presentation if you go to, I'm using a local server, but if you go to perspectivedatascience-mills.com, you can see this dashboard. And all of the supporting documents and all of the data is embedded here. I'm going to be working from this presentation outline, and to show you, I'm going to try to hit all of these to the best of my ability. Make sure I don't miss anything or get off course. I think so I'll plan to speak for about an hour or less. So we have plenty of time for a lot of discussion. I know there are some things that I'll say that could be interpreted maybe slightly differently. So I'm totally open to that discussion. And that's what actually is the point of the dashboard is really. It's about elevating the discussion. We were having a really hard time at my school keeping everybody on the facts. So it's a lot of people just kind of make up their own facts or stories that actually didn't match reality. And it's hard to have a good discussion about what's happening at your school if everybody has different ideas of what the problem is. So what the dashboard is trying to do is just kind of elevate the discussion, but I'll show you how it can be useful in that sense when I get there. Okay, so the first question I should get out of the way right away is, my wife asks me this all the time, actually, almost on a weekly basis, is like, why are you doing this work? I'm doing this for free. If you didn't know, I'm actually spending money on the websites. It's not a lot, but spending my time, of course, doing this. So what the heck am I doing this? I'm a tenure professor in economics, and I used to spend equal time, or if not more time, writing academic papers and finding some very, very useful results not only me, but other researchers in education policy. I've been doing this for about 12 years, and we have nailed down some very, very important policy implications for legislators, administrators, of course. But the problem I'm seeing on my end is a lot of folks that are in those roles aren't aware of what we know about how to run a school. All right, there's a lot of evidence here stacking up from me and from a whole lot of other folks that are smarter than me. So I see a problem, really. The problem is that we've got this disconnect between the researchers and the policymakers, the administrators, and they're just not acting on appropriately on the evidence that we've compiled. So let me first explain what evidence we do have, just a really general, quick sense. So I'm working here on the outline. So we know a couple things that are very, very clear about how we call it an education production function, about how students learn and what we can control in that process to make those outcomes for students better. The thing that's clear in every study I've seen, literally every study, is that teachers are by far the most important input that we can influence. All right. After that, it's like basically nothing else that a school can do, sadly, to improve outcomes. I mean, there are small things, of course. But I'm talking about those other things like administration, buildings. A lot of administrators get kind of hooked on these ideas of having some kind of a rollout of I call it a flavor of the month initiative. It's really frustrating for me as a researcher, because honestly, they would have been a lot better off just pumping that money into teacher salaries and retention. But I think the thing is that administrators don't want to do that because they want to look like they're doing something unique, right? And it's kind of boring just to pump money into salaries and look like you're not really doing something as an administrator. But actually, I think you're more effective when you do that. So long story short, the basic implication I have from the reading of the current evidence, which is very strong evidence, is that to maximum, so the basic economic problem an administrator has is that you've got a budget, right? How do you maximize your student outcomes given that budget? And it's pretty clear based on the evidence that the only thing that really matters that you can control is instructional quality, all right? And so for me, oh, I don't know how that happened. What did you miss? So the implied, I think I'll back up to here. Hopefully you heard the other part. So the implied optimal allocation of funds really should be to spend as much as you possibly can on instruction and minimize all of the other things that you're spending money on. That's really the philosophy that I've developed based on the evidence that we have. Yes, there could be schools that have low income students and they need to hire more counselors, things like that to ensure that the kids are successful. I get that, but that honestly shouldn't be all that expensive. And I'll explain why when we get into the dashboard. So really simple principle to get the best bang for your buck in sort of running a school at any level. It could be Head Start, could be K through 12, could be higher ed, is to get the best teachers you can and keep them happy. The way to do that is you got to pay, you got to spend money on instruction. Okay, so the general problem I have is I was working forever in K through 12. And in fact, 99% of researchers like me are working in K through 12 policy. And I'd go to these conferences and there'd be only just a handful of people studying higher ed issues. And so I never really took it seriously. I kind of always assumed that higher ed in the US must be the best in the world, right? I mean, everybody comes here, must be really efficient. K through 12 is where all the action is. Boy, was I way wrong. And I didn't realize this until I started working on my own school, the University of Tulsa. If you don't know anything about it, you probably don't, because we were terrible at marketing. Still are. We're getting better though. We have a 1.2 or $1.3 billion endowment for just 3,500 students or so, one of the richest schools in the country. And so somehow our administrators managed to run the place almost bankrupt, even though we have a $1.4 million endowment, as I just mentioned. So I felt it was my responsibility as a researcher and an employee at the University of Tulsa to use my skills to figure out what's going on. Well, I mean, this is bizarre. And when I looked at my school's finances and started seeing other schools' finances, I was actually very shocked and angry, to be quite honest, because the things that are happening in higher ed do not happen in K through 12. I mean, it's not even a discussion because those things are either illegal or there's so much oversight that nobody would dare spend the money the way that they're doing in higher ed. You would be immediately fired. There's too many people watching. But what seems to be happening in higher ed is not a lot of people are watching, especially these smaller schools, smaller private schools. There's hardly anybody paying attention to what they're doing with their money. So I think there's a huge need for me and others to get involved and make sure that this stops. It stops quickly because it's frankly pretty sad, right? A lot of these schools are dying for no good reason, really. And Mills is one of them. So that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I just think, the basic approach that we're taking in K through 12 needs to be applied to higher ed as well. I mean, a lot of these things, like I mentioned, are totally illegal. You cannot spend more than 5% of your budget on administration in Oklahoma. Other states have laws like that. And a lot of these higher ed institutions are spending well over half of their budgets on administrative things. It's just really shocking. And so to me, I'm wondering, why is this allowed to happen? And you might think, well, they're private schools, right? They can do what they want. And that's true. But we're also giving these private schools millions, tens of millions, billions in aggregate in taxpayer dollars. So, I mean, I think an obvious policy that we need to think about is adopting these kinds of policies where you say you can't spend that much on your administration, or limit it somehow. And if you can if you want, but you're not going to get Title IV aid if you do it, right? And of course, every school will fall in line because they all require student loans, federally subsidized student loans, and Pell Grants to survive. Essentially, that's their model. All right, so that's what I'm doing. And so you might have a question: why the heck did I pick Mills College as one to focus some time on? I need to be strategic, right? There's a bunch of schools, of course, that are doing bad things. I need to figure out which ones to focus in on. And Mills, to me, popped out because I made a list of schools based on administrative efficiency, which is the ratio of administrative spending. I think the way I have it on the dashboard, I have it as the ratio of instructional spending to administrative spending. All right, so if that ratio is higher than 1, that's good. If it's lower than 1, I mean, that's horrible. It means you're spending more on administration than you are on instruction. So that's one of the gauges I'm using to try to identify schools that appear to have serious problems with budget allocations. So Mills is one of them. They're in my list. And not only that, what struck me about Mills is it's quite wealthy and is perfectly capable of being one of the best schools in the country, just based on its current finances, not even what it was before enrollment started falling. And so it was shocking to me. And then I learned that Mills announced it was going to close. So that was the motivation for me to say, I have to do something about this, because I can't tell other schools that have like a quarter of the revenue of Mills that you're going to be fine if you do this and that, if they're looking at Mills that has way bigger revenue and they're closing. It's a really difficult thing for me to overcome. So I have to address Mills. I have to explain what's really happened here and why the school can't seem to turn a net income profit. All right, so here are some facts that this is how I found Mills. They're in the bottom 12%. I created a list of schools that are, in that bottom 20% or so. Mills is in there in terms of administrative spending relative to instructional spending. So the key here is that the average school, the median school in the country, is doing fine. They're spending a lot more on instruction than they are on administration. I would like that to be a lot higher. Of course, there are schools that are crushing it, and they're the schools that are ranked in the top 20, top 50. just to give you some more examples. So Mills, for example, spends $84 on instruction for every 100 it spends on administration. That's terrible. I mean, even the median here isn't great, but if Mills wants to be a top tier school, that just cannot happen. You have to spend most of your budget on instruction if you're going to be a serious school in this country. And some schools are doing great at this. So I wanted to give you some examples, like USC. Say what you want about USC. I don't know how you guys view USC. I don't really have an opinion, but they are crushing it in terms of how they're allocating their resources. They have gone from ranked like 46 in the country to in the top, I don't even remember, they're in the top 20 at least. I don't care a whole lot about rankings, but the reason that's happening is this: USC is pouring all of their resources into instruction. They're hiring the best faculty in the country. They're retaining them. They're offering small class sizes. And so for just a comparison, USC is spending $273 per 100 on administration, 273 versus 84 for Mills. I mean, I know Mills probably couldn't achieve that, but that's just giving you an idea of what the best schools are doing. And this is happening at all the top schools. You're talking about University of Chicago, Stanford, Caltech, Duke. They're all way up there. Rice is one of my favorites. They're really have no business competing with Harvard and Duke and all these top schools, and they're doing it. They're crushing it because they are allocating their money wisely. They pour every dollar they can into instruction. They minimize administrative costs, exactly what I was saying right here. All right. There's a couple of other schools that you might know about that are the same size as Mills. Scripps College and Harvey Mudd College. They're roughly the same size as Mills College. Harvey Mudd spends $159 on instruction for every 100 it spends on administration. Did I say Harvey Mudd or Scripps? They're both about the same, 159 and 162. All right, I mean, that's really great. And that's, Mills is missing the ball on that. And so again, that's the thing that tipped me off that I need to look into this school. On top of that, you can look at another way of looking at how the school is budgeting its resources, just look at how it's spending on instruction relative to other things. Not just administration as I put there, but we call it core spending, which is really every expenditure category except for auxiliary enterprises, which auxiliary enterprises is athletics, housing, food and dining, and the bookstore for the most part. Other things like parking and whatever. You can see, if you're interested in that, there's if I show you the dashboard, you can open this link and it'll tell you exactly what's, roughly what's in each functional classification. And that's followed actually by every school. It's a guideline created by the National Association of College and University Business Officers. I've got it open here. It'll just tell you what's in each spending category. All right. So Mills is terrible on that, of course. They're just not allocating money correctly. In fact, the median school allocates about 40%. Again, I'm really appalled by that. It needs to be a lot higher than that. K through 12, it's way higher. If you look at just the raw, the accounting's a little bit different in K through 12, but they're probably around 65, 70% going to instruction versus in higher ed, it's way lower. I just don't understand that logic, especially since K through 12 is serving the entire population of students, which are on average lower income than the ones that are going to higher ed. So they, if anything, K through 12 would be the one spending more on the other support services. All right, so that's how I ended up creating this dashboard. I wanted to make sure that people really understood what has happened at Mills, so that it's clear that this is sort of a self-inflicted thing. It's schools with far less revenue. Don't worry, you can operate fine. Just don't do what Mills is doing. All right, that's really all there is to it. All right, so here are the key takeaways from the presentation. I'll get those out right away. So obviously, that I'm going to say that Mills does not need to merge, certainly doesn't have to close. I don't really understand that announcement at all. It's really appalling, actually, to make that announcement so abruptly and then quickly say you're going to merge. Is really bizarre. Anyway, they don't need to do either of those things, of course. Mills revenue is one of the best in the country for its size, and it just has a problem where its costs are way out of line with what it's doing. And I'll get into the details on that. So I figure that Mills needs about 5.4 million to get on a sustainable path. I know I've heard other numbers from your administration, but honestly, I don't know what to make of those. Just today, for example, we had a budget last year at the University of Tulsa that projected us of having a loss of $9.5 million this year. But we actually, I just got the audit today. The audit showed a $2.1 million profit. The problem is with our budget is completely wrong. All right. The way we're doing budgeting at the University of Tulsa is totally inaccurate. And our board is making decisions based on a terrible budgeting process. So something that needs to be fixed here. I suspect it's also a problem at Mills where they're not really doing the budget the way that they're supposed to, which is they're supposed to project the statement of activities and the statement of cash flows in the budget. All right. And so if they're telling you that the budget deficit is 6 million, it really doesn't mean anything unless that budget is accurate. And a lot of times they're not. And it's probably the case there. Okay, so there's a lot of cost cutting that can be done. I think it's about $12 million realistically that could be saved at Mills at least, probably more. That's just to be average, by the way. Everything I'm gonna say, I'm not asking Mills to be extraordinary in any way. I'm just wanting them to be average in terms of what they spend on non-instructional things. If they just focus on being average in that area, you can save 12 million bucks. And I'll give you some details exactly how that could happen later, but this is again just giving you an overview of what I'm going to talk about. Another issue I saw is, there are different points in the student recruitment retention pipeline that you need to look at and see if there's a problem at any given level. It's very clear that Mills has a problem right at the beginning of the pipeline of where they're getting students to come into Mills. For whatever reason, we can talk about this later, in 2015, Mills lost half of its applications in 1 year. I've never seen anything like that. And of course, that means that the incoming class was about half. Well, what happened was they adjusted a little bit, probably let in a bunch of students that typically wouldn't get into Mills. They offered maybe, but they somehow got a better yield out of that smaller application pool. So what ended up happening was, the class in 2015 came in a lot smaller than, of course, the classes before it. And in fact, it stayed low. All those applications stayed low for years, and they're still low. So after 4 years, every incoming class that comes in is smaller, right? They're all actually similar size. So actually right now, Mills is at sort of a steady state in terms of its enrollment at about 1,000 students. And that's exactly what you predict based on the 4-year prior enrollment that came in. It was just half the size, really, or almost half the size of what typically comes into Mills. So, I mean, the obvious implication is you got to go back to what happened there, figure out what happened, and reverse that. I don't know. It could be a marketing thing. It could be just a lot of things can happen to lose applications. The nice thing about this, though, it's the easiest thing to actually improve. All right, we actually had the same problem at the University of Tulsa. I had a meeting with our admissions office and I said, hey, we get a very low number of applications for our type of school, our reputation relative to our peers. I said, our yield looks great. All we need to do is get more applications. And what have they done? They did exactly that. They're doing that right now. This new administration is going to do great because they're listening, and they have doubled or tripled, I can't remember what they said, tripled or doubled the number of applications. And we're actually looking like we're going to yield the same amount as we normally do. So we're going to have a monster incoming freshman class just because we fixed the applications problem. It's really that simple. At least it's that simple here at the University of Tulsa. All right, so I'll talk about some red flags too. With the Northeastern merger, it's not what you guys are thinking. Having a $1 billion endowment is great. We have it, but our costs are very low, right? We only have 3,500 students or so. Northeastern's costs are a lot bigger than that endowment supports. In fact, Northeastern looks a lot like a for-profit school because its endowment is tiny compared to its costs, right? And that's a big problem because Northeastern depends a lot on tuition revenue. And not only that, the thing that really worries me about Northeastern is that they depend on international student enrollment to keep their revenues high. And so I'm really curious of what their new audit's going to show, because it's got to be painful. If they lost a bunch of international students, they're going to have big problems. I'll talk about that when we get there. So be aware of that. You guys got to know what you're getting into. I don't know if there are faculty on this call. I hope there are, maybe administrators. You're going from a situation where you're not very dependent on tuition revenue right now to a situation where you are going to be extremely dependent on tuition revenue. Not only that, it needs to be high to support Northeastern's costs. And who do you think is going to be cut first when international students leave Northeastern? I guarantee it won't be the main campus. It's going to be the satellite campuses that are cut first. So I think you need to understand that, or at least have an idea of that this could potentially be a risk of this deal. And I think I really can't emphasize it enough. You're going to go from a model where you don't depend on tuition revenue. You can charge a really low tuition revenue and still be profitable. So that means you're open to low income students. You can operate your mission, right? Northeastern is a very different model. It's a model where they rely on very wealthy students, particularly international students that pay full price. And they charge them a ton, right? And that's how they operate. It's a very different model where Mills is catering to lower income folks, which is a beautiful mission. I mean, we need schools like Mills. That's another reason why I'm involved here. It's a really sad thing to lose a school like Mills that can afford to really offer a very high value for a low cost. In terms of, I'm talking from the student's perspective, they don't have to pay a lot to attend Mills and get a great value in the end. All right, so those are the main points I want to make sure you leave with. If you don't remember anything else that I say this whole presentation, just remember those two things. Mills does not have to close. It's very wealthy. It has a spending problem for the most part. Also, the revenue is a bad deal, but it's probably plateaued now because that's four consecutive classes came in that were the same size. So that you're getting to what we call a steady state. And I think maybe some of the panic about wanting to merge or close is because they still are expecting losses. I don't think that's really the case. Although telling people you're going to close is going to be a problem. All right. So I'll get to that. All right. A little bit about the dashboard. So why did I create the dashboard? So I started out with my school creating like Excel sheets, graphics, things like that. The problem with those is I send them out to people and then they kind of forget about it, right? And it just, I don't know what happens. They forget the email or whatever. And then I'd find myself in a conversation weeks later where somebody's saying something that's totally inaccurate based on what we know in the data. And so I was like, man, this is a problem that we can't keep the conversation elevated if everybody keeps going back to old stories that, I mean, really just telling stories about what's happened at TU that just aren't true, right? Our administration was telling us that we had a revenue problem and that we lost international students and that's why we're going broke. You want to know the real story? The real story was the athletic department lost like $10 million in 1 year and maintained that low net income. So our football program was basically losing $10 million a year. They didn't tell us that, of course. That went on for several years. And then our enrollment started to fall on top of it. And they would then blame the whole problem on revenue from tuition. And so the whole thing was just made up, right? Of course, the main problem really was not that we lost students. Our enrollment looked fine. They're charging like zero price to a whole bunch of folks that should have been paying. And so on top of that, really the athletics was the main driver of our financial problems. But so the point I'm trying to make is don't take at face value, of course, what your administrators say or what other people say about their experiences. It could be very wrong. And I know this from experience, just working with data. I'll have preconceived notions about what the problem is or what the effect will be. And working with the data, you get a totally different result, right? It's really common. So I've learned from experience to just default to what the data says. If there's something wrong with the data, then we can have that conversation and fix it, right? But if you're not using the data, it's really difficult to come to an agreement on what's happened and how to fix it. All right, so what I'm going to try to do is with this section is give you guys some context for Mills' financial situation. The main point here is that Mills is very wealthy. I'll show you. It just has a really hard time balancing its budget, and it's really just a discipline problem, I think. I mean, I kind of think about Mills as like the situation where, you guys have all seen it, right? Where the professional athlete goes bankrupt, right? A multimillionaire goes bankrupt and then blames their revenue for being, or blames their income for the problem. It's not, I mean, to me, it's a spending problem. And maybe you agree with me, maybe you don't, but I'll explain to you why I believe this is mostly a spending problem. Okay, let me go back to the dashboard to show you some key stuff. So here's let me move you the screen here. So here's what I have Northeastern in the list. I'm going to take them out just because they're so much different than, of course, these other schools. Just so much bigger. Everything's scaled way differently. So this is the main number you want to focus on as a nonprofit. And this is really your profit as a nonprofit. We don't really call it profit, of course, but change in unrestricted net assets is the main number that you're looking at in terms of how you're doing in terms of, you know, balancing your budget. All right, this is a positive number if your revenue is exceeding your costs. It's simple as that. And you can see that, you know, mostly Mills has negative values. They do have some good years, and so it's not like every year Mills has lost money. In fact, they made money in 2020, made money in 2018, made money in lost a little bit in 2017. I mean, so this is what it looks like. Actually, looks a lot like your peers, but it moves a lot more, which is understandable here. This was the Great Recession. You guys have a huge endowment. Of course, you're going to take a lot of pain when the market crashes. But over here, you can see that you guys are consistently below your peers in terms of net change in unrestricted assets, or what we call net income. All right. So there is really, it's not like Mills has always been bad or always good. There's just a mix happening here. On average, over the last, well, since I think, what year does this start? 2001, Mills has lost on average 3.5 million per year on average. All right, but that includes this year where you lost 64. That was a bad year. That was because of the crash, right? I think what happened was you guys probably had a big quasi endowment that just got crushed that year, but it'd be really interesting to look at what happened there. But since then, been pretty standard, although more negative than positive, which is not where you want to be. All right, let me go back to my outline. Okay, let me show you your revenue versus your expenses compared to other schools. So let me start with revenue. I'll go to the revenue page. So this is total revenue. And again, I'm going to take off Northeastern because of Northeastern's just an odd duck. It's in this group. Of course, it's really big. I just put it in here so that we can talk about the merger a little bit. All right, so here's Mills's revenue. It's always higher than your peers, except for 1 year. It's very good. It moves around a lot. You might wonder what that's all about. That's because of market movements. Again, a lot of Mills's revenue is going to come from endowment. Well, the way that IPEDS reports it, it's got investment returns built in here. So that's going to be super volatile, and that's why it moves around a lot. But notice it's always higher than your peers. And so let's see. So I was going to show you. Yeah, so your average revenue here, your revenue in 2020 is 59 million, and your peer revenue is also 59 million. But if you adjusted it for not the size of the school, these are just raw values in millions. The same revenue as these peer groups, but these peer group schools are bigger than you on average. So if you adjust for that on a per student basis, you guys' revenue is amazing. It's $58,000 per student revenue versus 46 in the peer group. All right, so that's very healthy. I mean, when I saw this, is like, well, clearly this is a spending problem, right? I mean, you can't ask for much higher revenue than that, all right, realistically, although I think I've identified a way that Mills could do a lot better, not necessarily per student, but on the raw number, you can get back to here, I think, fairly easily. I don't want to overstate it, but it has, in our experience at TU, been pretty straightforward to increase the number of applications and work on your pipeline that way. All right, so yeah, so I get the arguments people are making that Mills has a revenue problem. I get it. Yeah, Mills's revenue did decrease, but it's not like catastrophic, to be honest. Mills is still very rich. It just needs to match its spending to its revenue. In fact, you want to put it a little bit below, 3.5% below to be exact. So again, they had $63 million in unrestricted revenue in 2020, 54 million in 2019. What's the difference here? 2020 is an odd year. You guys had a bizarre spending policy from the endowment. You also had the COVID relief money that came in. So I'll look at mostly this 2019 number, just because 2020 was odd. But it's even the 2019 number is very healthy, way above the median of all private degree, sort of standard 4-year degree colleges in the country. I mean, so basically, if you agree that Mills is not a viable school, that means over half of the schools in the country are not viable. I mean, that's really the problem I have, and that's why I absolutely have to address this issue with Mills. Because I cannot work on other schools and tell them, hey, you guys are going to be fine, when people are saying, sold the Shakespeare folio for 9 million. Yeah, there's some of that could be in there. Some of that could be in there, one-time things. So maybe the actual losses could be a little bit bigger, but it really doesn't matter. Revenue's still great. From operations, it's good. Just got to match your costs. Costs are just like off the charts, really, for everything except for instruction, and I'll get to that. So just to put it in context, if you look at schools that are the same size as Mills, the Mills is 8th highest ranked in terms of revenue. I mean, so it's the argument that Mills has a revenue problems doesn't resonate with me, because it's one of the richest schools for its size in the country. I'm not going to accept that it's a revenue problem based on that alone, really. So here's the problem. Mills, in my view, this is the main problem. Mills spends a lot more than the average school in its peer group, about $15 million more on average. I could show you that. On the expenditure side here, if we just do, this is per student values and total expenses, you can see it's just like skyrocketing per student spending happening at Mills. Part of that's because you lost some students, right? What's happening is you're losing students faster than you're cutting costs. Which should be okay. You could catch up now pretty easily, I think, because it's kind of flattened out, but who knows now since the announcement's been made. But this gap right here is $15 million. Actually, if you take out Northeastern, if you did the calculation here and convert this back, I believe it's 15 million on a per student basis. Even raw values, I mean, even if I don't adjust for that, the fact that Mills is small, its raw revenue is better than its peers on average. Expenses are higher than its peers. We're talking about expenses. I mean, that's raw, okay? Mills spends more than the average of these schools, all right? And then I can even pare it down, which I did on, if you've seen the Facebook site, I can pare it down to schools that have virtually the same number of students, and this gap is a lot bigger. All right, it's just, spending at Mills is very, very high. All right, so that is that. All right, so I think, so again, the problem is not, yeah, revenue could be better, but I mean, you can fix the problem right away if you just kind of right size all of your spending. It's never been, it's always been high though. That's the thing. Like even back in 2002, whatever, go way back, Mills has always been spending way more than its peers. And I've also heard really good comments, actually, people saying, well, maybe that's because the cost of living is higher in Oakland. Yeah, that's true. I checked on that though, but so the interesting thing is that Mills is actually not paying more in terms of salaries. So that argument doesn't really hold water, because Mills is not spending more on salaries, which is a big part of course, that would be the cost of living difference mainly right there. So Mills has somehow managed to spend a lot more than these other schools while spending way below your cost of living adjusted wages, market wages. So it's something else going on. They're spending a lot of money. I think I can narrow it down to a few things for you guys. I can't completely explain all of the gap though. All right, and I'll get to that in a minute. I've also heard stories of liquidity problems at Mills. Looks like, yeah, a few years cash was tight, but I mean, it's not horrible. And, you know, on average, you guys were losing cash about 300K per year. That's not awful. I mean, you've been paying down debt recently, which is good. This is all related really to having costs that are too high, right? To use new audit, we had the same problem here at the University of Tulsa, having a hard time making payroll, using a line of credit to make payroll. But guess what? We cut costs, and this year we had 15 million cash surplus, right? We just paid off 25 million in debt this last year alone. 15 of it came from operations, another 10 came from donations. You can do it at Mills as well. All right, liquidity is not great. I mean, of course it's not. You guys are spending more than you're bringing in. That's the problem. All right, so here's the point though I wanted to make, that Mills can get back on track. Need about 5.4. I mean, we can debate this. Maybe it's more because they sold some art, right? I mean, some of these years maybe look better than they really were. But to be honest, I think it's doable because the overspending is very large. So you can fix it with just cuts to costs and still be one of the, not even affect instruction, right? That's the thing that's really, I'm an economist, right? You want to minimize those other costs. Like I said at the beginning, you could actually spend more on instruction and compete with schools like Scripps, and places like that, if you were to right size your non-instructional spending. But not doing that at the moment, right? And I get it. People don't want to cut. It's difficult, right? People are going to lose jobs. It took me about 5 or 6 months to convince my school, the board here, that we had a spending problem. It took a long time to convince them of that, and now they're like drunk with it. I mean, now they're going crazy with it. I can't get them to stop. So that's actually what I'm working on now, is tell them, hey, you guys cool it with the cuts. You can do it. All right, you just need to be objective. I really hope that Mills does it. Like I said, I don't know if you're able to save the school at the moment, but it'd be really a sad thing to have happen for low income folks, especially. Just don't think that the merger is going to be good for low income students in your typical student enrolling at Mills. Okay, let's see. So what typically happens here is I got to the 5.4 million because you guys lose 3.5 million on average, but what typical school does is build in 3.5% buffer, right? We call it net income margin target, right? And it's usually 3.5%. Actually, the partner that you're going to join, if you do join, is very good at this. They set their margin right at 3%, 3.5%, and they hit it every year, really, regardless of what happens to enrollment. So they're very, very disciplined on the budget side, which is the only thing that they're better at, really, I think, than Mills. So let me just show you that result. If I go back to key financials, and this is net income margin percent, and just show you Northeastern. Northeastern right at 3.5% on average. I mean, and they barely move. That's perfect. That's exactly what you want to do. To get there, you got to set your revenue. Your budget needs to be set so you have a 3.5% cushion. That's the standard. All right, so let me go back to the presentation. So if you build in that 3.5% cushion plus the 3.5 structural deficit, although it could be higher, like I said, there's some art and stuff like that I didn't account for. You get to 5.4 million. That's totally doable. It's not huge. It's only 10% or so of your revenue. So where do you get the 5.4 million? So I think you have two options, of course. You can do, it doesn't really matter how you do it, whether it's through revenue growth or cuts to costs, or you can do the combination. I mean, I would try to do the combination if you could, but you could do it with just cuts alone and, balance the budget right away, right? If you're worried about it, just get there in 1 year. All right, so on the revenue side, here's what I think you can do. So here's the pipeline. This is what I was talking about earlier. I was checking every stage of how you get a student into Mills and how you retain them. And everything checked out fine for me when I was checking this out. You can check yourself. The number of applications was the big problem. It dropped a lot in 1 year. It's not like you became more selective or anything. You're actually not that selective at all, and neither is most schools are not selective at all. That's really a myth. But the percent that are, this is the yield, All right, that's a really important number because if that one's a problem, then it's harder to fix. But this is not the problem. Yield is good. So that's the percent of admitted students that actually enroll. That's stayed solid and has not changed. And then on top of that, you want to wonder, how's retention after we get them here? That also looks good to me. And I'll show you all these things in the dashboard so you can decide for yourself. So let me see, let's go to the first part of the pipeline here, applications. And again, I need to take Northeastern out of here. They're just so big. Okay, so here's you may have seen this picture before, but this kind of thing right here, I mean, I can't believe that people wouldn't, I mean, this should be like front page news for the school. This is a huge catastrophic event right here to lose half of your applications in 1 year, and it stayed low all these years. All right, so that means unless your yield goes up here, or you admit more, right, or both, that means the number of students is going to go down every year for 4 consecutive years, right? And that's exactly what happens. And so let me show you the other things that I think are fine. So percent of applicants admitted, it's fine. I mean, you guys became less selective. Of course, you're trying to deal with the fact they have fewer applications. That's reasonable. So you sort of offset the drop in applications by just admitting more people. But then I was checking out, okay, what's the yield look like among the admitted? Looks great. I mean, that's great. What you're really looking for here is any sudden movement, and the yield looks good. So the kids that are applying after this crash are actually your most likely to enroll. So it's not yield that's a problem. It's just that you lost a whole bunch of folks that had a slightly lower yield that are not applying at all anymore. So something bizarre happened. Something bizarre happened there, and I'm not sure exactly what it was. I have an idea. Like I said, it's really easy to move the needle on applications, right? There's simple things you can do, like, of course, marketing better, which we're doing. You can also join the Common app, right? You get a whole bunch of flooded applications that are just really people just clicking a button. The yield's not great on those, but that's something you can do to get more applications. It's probably mainly marketing, and that's really what's going to affect the applications in my view. All right, so let me go back to the presentation. Okay, so right, so I think that's the revenue part. It's really all about applications for me. You got to go back and get back to that level of applications you had in pre-2015. Maintain the same yield, emit the same percentage, should be fine. In theory, right? Of course, maybe I could be missing something. Maybe you don't agree with me. That's totally fine. That's why I created this dashboard, so that at least we can have the conversation. All right. So here's what I would do. I would, of course, this is just to be average. If Mills wants to be average on the non-instructional side, that means it could save $12.2 million per year on just cost cutting. Mills is very high on every area, really. You got academic support. That's like your middle management. It's your dean's offices. I can show you academic support, dean's offices, library, computing, museums, academic advising. You guys do have a museum, so maybe you're going to be high there no matter what. That's fine. But again, I think you're way too high on academic support. I can show you that. Expenses. All right, and let's go to academic support. And again, I'll take out Northeastern. Yeah, I mean, see, there's just an explosion of spending and academic support happening here. That's per student, of course, so some of it could be explained by per student. So it's actually overall pretty constant. And that's the thing that's really appalling to me. If a school's having a budget problem, this should be the first thing you cut. Actually, maybe the second thing you cut. First thing is institutional support. It hasn't been cut at all throughout this entire time. In fact, right when the crisis really started happening was 2015. Academic support is a little higher. That's just unacceptable to me. Another reason why I created this dashboard. So another area you guys are high is institutional support. Again, what is going on here? This is raw. Increased institutional support by, is that 3 million? Over $2 million. I don't understand that. Institutional support is your upper administration. So that's your salaries for your upper administration. Let me show you everything in there. executive vice president's office. These are the top administrators' offices, the business office, legal services, accounting. There's really, it's unexcusable to me that that would go up. It makes no sense. That's the first thing you should cut, actually, if you're having a financial crisis, and it did the opposite. All right, you know, student services are high, not terribly high though. Let's see, auxiliary enterprise. I think I know why this is high, and I'll explain why this is high in a little bit. So this is 8.5 versus 9.6. That's, what is that? 1.1 million difference. But again, if you adjusted it for the number of students, it's like totally off the charts. All right. I think what this problem here is your food contract is ridiculous, and I'll show you that in a second. So auxiliary enterprises, in case you're wondering, again, that is athletics, housing, dining, bookstore, parking, if you have a restaurant on campus. All right. I think, is that all of the, yeah. Public service is high, of course, but that's good. I mean, Mills has a mission for public service, so you'd expect that. I wouldn't even really mess with that, but you could. Again, you want to cut things that are as far from your mission, you know, start by cutting things that are far from your mission. That means you cut first non-instructional things, right? But what Mills did was the opposite. And this is what really drove me nuts. Mills actually did a good job of keeping up with the enrollment declines, cutting instruction. But you look at raw values, I mean, that is, again, unexcusable to me. They cut severe cuts in instruction at the same time, increasing institutional support and academic support. That is, again, illegal in a normal K through 12 school, and it, in my opinion, should be illegal in higher ed as well. At least take away their funding. I mean, you're using tax dollars to do this. It's really appalling. All right, let's see. Okay, let's see. All right, so I was going to tell you guys exactly, I mean, those are the broad categories. You're really high on everything, but I would focus on institutional support, academic support, and auxiliary enterprises. Again, cutting stuff there should not affect your mission at all. You can be very bare bones on those things and be a top-notch schools. In fact, some of my favorite schools are ones that do that. They're phenomenal on the instructional side, very low on the institutional support, academic support, auxiliary enterprises side. Okay, so let me give you some guidance on where you can get that money. I can't find all of it. If the data set I have, I need to get more granular with it. But I'm pretty sure, you know, you have staffing problem, particularly in two areas, in IT and business and financial operations. Let me just show you where you can find that information. If you go to the expenditure tab on the dashboard, go down, here's where I'm finding that information. So this is all non-instructional staff. So first of all, the salaries at Mills are not high, 66K on average. That's only 8,000 higher than the mean of the peer group. So it's not like Mills is spending a ton of money on salaries. They do have a lot of extra staff though, 56 in aggregate, but where are those folks? Computer and engineering, that's the IT part. You guys are the highest per student there, 16 extra staff in that area. And also the other area was, where was it? Business and financial operations. Again, the highest per student out of all these schools by a long shot. I mean, if you're going to compare it to, you know, some of these other schools. Again, 24 extra people there. And again, salaries are right in line. It's not like Mills is not paying any kind of premium for cost of living. That's pretty clear. All right, just to give, so one thing I was checking out too is, how did you guys compare to Holy Names? As far as I understand, they're just right down the road, right? Holy Names does what I was going to say you guys should do for your staffing. They employ a lot fewer staff, but notice this, they pay their staff on average about 17K higher. That's exactly what Mills needs to do, right? So there you go. Holy Names is paying their employees a lot more than you guys are at Mills. That's not right. A couple problems with paying low. You're gonna have low morale. And not only that, you have a whole bunch of extra staff with low morale, right? So your productivity is going to be low, and it's just going to sap the budget. So I figured it out. You guys could match. You could match Holy Name's employment levels. I'm just looking at. Let's go to all instructional staff. You could cut 66 personnel to match Holy Names, and then crank up the salaries by 10.5K, and still save like 2.3 million or something like that. This is really a big problem with staffing. The salaries are low and the numbers are just way too high. Yeah, 2.7 million if you just match what Holy Names does. And again, I get the argument, Holy Names, different kind of mission, but you guys have to be within your budget. I mean, you can't do everything. You got to do the best you can with the budget you have. And I think it's pretty clear you're not doing that at the moment. All right, and then I was going to show you the other spot where you can find some money, and then the rest you guys have to figure out with your administration, which I doubt they're going to be forthcoming with it, but you can look into it. You can guarantee, I'm guaranteeing you Northeastern will figure it out. They're very good at balancing their budget. Let's see, so the contracts look way out of whack. All right, let me show you where to find those. Key insights. Right here. All right, so what I'm going to show you here is the independent contractors. This is another really appalling thing that's happening in higher ed, is there's a ton of money going to private contractors, and Mills is doing it excessively. So a lot of private contractors come through universities. I can see them a little bit. I can't, unfortunately, see them in IPEDS, but you can see them within the 990. So I just pull all this information off of your tax 990. And one thing that pops out of me right away is your food service contract is 3.6 million. That is extremely high for the number of students that Mills has. In fact, I've seen schools that have double the enrollment Mills has, and they pay less than this on their food service contract. Holy Names is about the same size as Mills. They pay 1.7. So the gap right there alone is just 1.8 million. So just go hire Mills food service provider. That's one option. Again, yeah, maybe the food you're providing is better than Holy Names, but is it Mills' mission to provide top-notch food to its students? I don't think so, right? It's instruction. So let's have priorities straight here. Facilities management looks fine. Marketing. Notice Holy Name spent some money on marketing. I don't see that going on at Mills. That was actually one of the problems we had at our schools. We had a lot of in-house marketing folks. We were paying over $1.5 million just in salaries to marketing folks, and our marketing was terrible. So what was one of the things we did was outsource our marketing. We saved a bunch on the wages, and we got higher quality marketing now. That's a big reason why our applications are higher. Campus security, yeah, contractor there as well. That's interesting because we were doing this in-house as well. We still are, and spending a ton of money on it. I'd like to see exactly how many you have in campus security at Mills. This was a really peculiar part too. Mills is building buildings, 2.6 million about, right before it's announcing it's going to close. And that seemed really odd to me. It could be innocent, I don't know, but that seemed bizarre because not very many schools are building any buildings, let alone schools that are about to go bankrupt. So are not really going about bankrupt, but about to announce they're going to close. This would have been just a few months before the announcement was. It's bizarre to me. And then here's another one, Noodle. Okay, I actually just had a meeting yesterday. We have Noodle at the University of Tulsa, and it's a complete disaster. So we pay them this is what you're paying Noodle. And what you get for that, I think, is just like the support to create online classes. But the cost is a lot higher. You're going to be paying your faculty to develop those classes. You pay support staff to support the students that join Noodle. And what we're finding is that the Noodle students come in, they're very different from our normal students. And they're lower quality on average. They don't pay very much, and we're providing a ton of services to them and paying faculty extra to develop these classes. We're losing millions on this Noodle contract. I don't know if that's the case with Mills, but I would guess it is. And it's bizarre to me again. I don't think Mills should be really involved in the online schooling business, to be quite honest. Mills is going to be providing world-class in-person instruction. That's what your market is. Stay there, just be the best you can at it. All right, then there's a whole bunch of other contractors I can't explain. Holy Names only has 5 that they pay between somewhere between 100K and 322K. So if you just take the midpoint on that, it's another 500,000. Mills has a whole lot of contractors. It's a big number for its size. Again, a whole bunch of contractors, probably somewhere around 3.5 million, 3.6 million going to those folks. I can't tell you what they are. Yeah, so you got to check that out. Again, I can only see so much in the 990s. All right, let me go back to my outline here. I think I'll wrap up pretty soon so that you guys can, we can have a discussion. All right, so here's the part where I was going to ask questions mainly. I mean, to me, the merger looks not good for Mills. It looks great for Northeastern, and let me explain why. Northeastern has a big problem in that they're very reliant on tuition, and especially from international students. I'd be very worried if I were their upper administration, because even a small dip in the number of international students they have is going to have a huge impact on their revenue, which means they're going to have to cut stuff, right? And who are they going to cut first? It's going to be places like Mills that are the satellite campuses, I believe. So what Northeastern needs to do is get a much bigger endowment and do that quickly before they start having to make cuts, because honestly, I don't think international enrollment is going to be the way ever back to where it was. There's a lot of things driving that. One is, of course, the pandemic, but the main driver, of course, is that other countries are developing their higher ed landscape as well. And we're just not going to get as many international students. Certainly not international students coming in paying full price. It's kind of ridiculous that they do anyway, but they are. Those days are over. They're going to be over soon. So I'd be very worried if I were Northeastern higher ups. I could be wrong about that. I mean, I hope they don't have a lot of pain, but I sure don't think it's a good idea for Mills to jump into that, because right now Mills has a great situation where they're not really dependent on tuition. You guys have a very low reliance on tuition and fees. Only 31% of your revenue is that, versus Northeastern, where it's virtually all of their revenue, 73%. That's very, very high for a nonprofit, I should say. I checked it out. I think it was Grand Canyon University, the biggest for-profit school in the country, is actually 64%. All right, they're less reliant on tuition than a nonprofit. It's a very bizarre thing. So Northeastern looks more to me like a for-profit school, and I don't think that's jiving really with Mills's mission of providing a high-quality education at a low price. That's just not going to happen at Northeastern. Can't afford it. Unless Northeastern got a lot smaller, right? They have $1 billion endowment. They could become small like us, like 3,000 students, and then offer a really high quality education for a low price. But I mean, that involves cutting a whole lot of stuff. All right. Okay, I think I made the point there. Not only that, they just have really low donor support. You can see their gift revenue is very small per student compared to Mills. I just don't like how that looks. It's certainly not going to put Mills in a better situation than it currently has. Right now, they're very insulated from shocks to enrollment, although it may not seem that way on your end. It's different from what you're expecting. It's just you haven't really matched your costs to your revenue very well for years, for as long as I can see in the data, actually. And the student population is very different at Northeastern, so kind of worry about how Mills' students will survive in that kind of arrangement. I mean, I hope that Northeastern has plans to serve low-income students. They say they are, I believe, right? They're saying they're going to continue Mills' mission. But that involves a very different model than what they're currently operating. Right now, they only get 11% of students in Pell Grants. And students go to Mills are 52% Pell Grants, pretty poor. I've seen a lot poorer than that, though. It's not like off the charts poor, but compared to Northeastern, it's totally different. And student loan percentage, you can see, is very different. I already mentioned international enrollment, very different kind of student body. So I just put a bunch of questions here at the bottom that, I hope you guys are asking. Again, if there are faculty members on the call, I would ask these things. It's really important to get answers to these questions and detailed answers. I mean, especially, how does shared governance look at Northeastern? That's a big part of managing a successful university. And it's actually the reason I think more schools are not doing what Northeastern's doing. The problem with what Northeastern is doing, I think, from a logistics standpoint, is it's very difficult to manage one university and have proper shared governance, right? I mean, faculty having a say, the board having a say, and administration having a say, and everybody, kind of getting on the same page that way. That's the way that universities are supposed to be run, and it's actually required for accreditation. In fact, faculty are supposed to have all control over the academic side of the institution. I just wonder how that looks at Northeastern, how they pull that off with 10 campuses, because I know from experience this is really difficult even with one campus. So I'd check into that. Would Mills even have a say? I mean, is there going to be a faculty senate at Mills that's going to have some kind of vote in like an overall senate? I don't know. Yeah, low-income students. I mean, is Northeastern interested in offering a school that's gonna not turn a profit? I mean, that's the way that Mills operates. They support their students using the endowment, which allows them to bring in a lot less in revenue, tuition revenue, than they spend, right? That's the model. So you can cater to low-income students, not charge them an arm and a leg, and provide a great product. Northeastern can't do that. So I'm wondering if they're going to continue to do that at Mills. That would mean that they would have to use Mills's endowment for the new school, right? I don't know if that's happening. So that's part of this question. Is the Mills endowment still going to be used for Mills students? What about donations? Very healthy donor base at Mills. Is that going to still happen? Are those donations going to go to Northeastern? Are they going to stay at Mills in the new arrangement? I mean, I just wonder if the whole plan, I just find it hard to believe that Northeastern would really care that much about Mills. They want that money, right? They need, like I said, they need that endowment to grow very quickly. And this merger does that for them. Mills' endowment, I mean, that potentially is a big boon to them, especially if they can sell the land and all that. I mean, they could really pump up their endowment, which is exactly what they need to be more sustainable. All right. And then the last thing, I'd really like to see the new audit. I just checked today, it's not out. Our new audit is out. Ask them for this. Take a look at their new audit, because the curious thing I want to see is they probably had a big drop in international enrollment in 2021. Take a look at how that affected their net unrestricted assets. And it probably was painful for them, but I'd like to see how they deal with that. Because that's really what their vulnerability is, and you can see it maybe in 2021. Okay, that was long. I'm sorry, I want to make sure I had everything in there. So please start with questions. I actually wasn't even monitoring the chat. So.
Well, thank you so much, Matt. That's incredibly informative. We're going to take some written questions now, and then once we finish those, then we'll ask people to raise hands, and Kimberly will help me try to get those in order of people raising hands. So the first question, and I apologize if I say your name wrong, is from, let me turn my video on. I apologize. Here we go. This is from, I think it's Carla Fellows. Her question is, does it seem that too many institutions are implementing short-term solutions for long-term issues?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think in general, the incentives for administrators are not necessarily aligned with the goals of the institution, right? And I think that's fundamentally what the problem is. Administrators want to grow their own budgets. They want to get more people underneath them, have more job security. And that is actually usually contrary to what the university should do. All right. And I think that's what's causing the problem. And it's the board's job to make sure that that doesn't happen. The problem is that these boards, I think, just not staffed by folks that really know what to look for. Maybe just not spending a lot of time on it. I mean, I've seen boards that meet like 1 or 2 times a year, and they probably just sign some papers and call it good, right? I mean, I've even seen schools where the administration themselves are putting people on the board. So there's like zero check to that. Yeah, I could stop screen sharing.
Okay. Next question from Ariana. Have you seen a relationship between Board of Trustees configuration and their interests to the financial trajectory and support for faculty in higher ed schools?
Yeah. So I'll give you an example. St. Xavier, I'm working with them. It's a complete mess. What happened is they hired a new president, came in, she was just really bold and cut a whole bunch of stuff, which was fine. They had to do some cuts, but she got really crazy with it and did really what Mills did, cut their instructional side to like bare bones, while not cutting anything else. Big problem again. So what she also did is, I think, to sort of consolidate power, is she got rid of like half of the board. So they don't have like 8 board members now, and a good number of them were put there by her. So there's like 0. I really feel bad for those faculty at St. Xavier. I mean, I've been trying to help them, but it's really difficult to get anywhere with them, and they need HLC really to get involved, and which is what they're trying to do at the moment, because there's really no check on their upper administration at the moment. The board is just totally, in line with the upper admin.
Okay, next question from Gretchen Garlinghouse. Mills has a very old unmaintained property. How does that affect the ability to return to being a functional college?
A really old what?
Unmaintained property.
Oh, so I mean, that's not great, but the debt level at Mills is very low. I think last I checked, the bond balance is 25 million. That's extremely low, right? So Mills can issue bonds and build new buildings really easily. I mean, credit rating is probably pretty bad though, but I mean, you can still issue bonds, just could pay a higher rate. It shouldn't be a problem as long as you don't get too extravagant with the bonds. And the thing about these bonds is you can constantly reissue them to pay off the old balance, right? So that's what all these schools do. Mills hasn't been doing that.
Okay, great. So in the interest of time, I'm seeing a number of hands now. So I'm going to switch over to calling on folks. And the first hand that went up was Aaron's. Aaron, are you able to unmute yourself? Nope. I need there we go.
There we go. Okay, thank you. Matt, thank you, first of all, so much for doing this, because I know we all have a lot of financial questions, and not being financial people puts us at a disadvantage in that way. So I speak for probably many people who are very grateful that you're here today. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, that means a lot. I don't think I mentioned this. This is not easy. That's why my wife is like, why do you constantly do this? And in fact, I prefer to write the journal articles, but I think this is the way I can make the biggest impact, to be honest, and is something that's really needed in higher ed. And I'm trying to do the best I can without, losing my mind. But there's a lot of people get very mad at me, as you can probably imagine. So just trying to deal with that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, we see it on the chats, and
yeah,
sometimes the people who are mad are more vocal than the people who are grateful. So yeah. I just want to be one of those grateful people who is very happy that you're here.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of used to it, but it's always, it happened at my own school, right? I mean, some of my friends were against what I was doing, and in the end, it worked out really well for us. I don't know what would have happened had I not done the data work, because that's really what pushed us over the top.
Yeah, and that's why it's so important for us to understand, so we can, I think a lot of us are still trying to fight the fight that's left to fight, but it requires having some explanation of why we think there needs to be some intervention here financially, and we have to be able to understand that in order to communicate that to other organizations who can help pressure an investigation. There should be no harm in any kind of financial investigation if there's nothing to be found, but it seems like there's a heavy rationale for exploring other options. So I just, from my understanding, one of my big questions is, I have two. One is, what other things might we not see in publicly filed financials that, like, I don't know if it's debt or costs that we're not seeing that could be hidden, that could maybe explain some of this acquisition? That's one question. And then my other question is, when you define peer groups, maybe it's clear on the dashboard because I haven't looked at it yet, but what really defines a peer group? Is it an endowment? enrollment?
Yeah, I forgot to mention that. I'm glad you brought that up. So the second question I'll address first. The peer group, I did not pick that peer group. I use a machine learning algorithm that it trains itself to find peers by looking for schools that have similar characteristics on a number of different dimensions, like the endowments, enrollment, the type of degree programs it offers, a whole bunch of stuff on the peer. I don't want to go back sharing my screen, but if you go to the peer institutions page, all of those variables that are on that page are used in that machine learning algorithm to find the peers. And then I modified it a little bit recently so it would spit out more local peers. So I weighted the schools that are in the same state a little higher. So that's why you're seeing more California states show up in there, or California schools. Your first question was, if I remember right, what are we not seeing on the publicly filed statements? I don't think there's anything there that we're not seeing. I mean, that's the point of the audits, really. It's gonna have everything in it. So they're very useful. I'm really thankful that the government is requiring this, of course, right?
Do we see all of the debt on those financial statements?
Yeah,
Like that
that'll be in your balance sheet.
Okay.
And you have it linked on the dashboard, but you should see your bonds are about 25 million, I believe.
Okay. So arguably there shouldn't be anything that's hidden.
No.
That we're not seeing.
Oh, it should be all there. Although, like, the tricky thing is, it's not disaggregated enough for me to point to, like, this is where you need to do cuts. But I try to do that a little bit with you guys. But it's the best I can do with what the information I have is kind of point at a few general areas to look.
Can I ask one more question, sorry, about predatory colleges? Have you noticed any kind of trend with colleges that, well, I would consider predatory because they're looking at colleges that are weak financially?
Yeah.
Moments? Is this something?
I'm going to spend more time studying this Northeastern strategy because I don't know of any other schools that are doing what Northeastern's doing. And frankly, Northeastern is not really in a position to be growing. They need to grow their endowment first. They've really grown too fast for their endowment, is my assessment. So they're in a situation now where they're just like a for-profit school, which is not what you want. You want to offer high quality education at a low price. Is really the problem we have in higher ed, is a lot of these schools think they're for-profits. Northeastern is acting like a for-profit. And what ends up happening then is you get a lot of college debt, right?
Okay, let's keep moving on. We only have 7 minutes left and we have a lot of hands up. Kelly D, you were next. So if we can just keep it to one question, please. Thank you.
So one of the arguments that I have heard about about the declining enrollment is looking long-term with the lower birth rates that are going on, that the eligible pool of applicants for college, that is one of the reasons we're doing this, because we're looking way long-term and our pool is not going to grow. So I'd like you to address that if you would.
Yeah, I've heard that too. That's like the go-to strategy for these administrators, by the way. I hear it's like a broken record. It's actually a professor near where I grew up that published a book showing the drop-off in birth rates, and administrators are loving it because it explains everything, right? Whenever they have a problem, they blame demographics, but it's not really accurate. And it hasn't been accurate yet when I looked at, so let me just show you how I checked this. So holy names, they're going to be suffering the same kind of demographic problem you are, right? But look at what happened to their enrollment the same time that yours dropped off. And here's the interesting thing. Their enrollment's increasing, yours is decreasing. Look at the applications, number of applicants. The same time you guys cratered, theirs explode. So basically what I'm seeing here is that Mills lost the market and Holy Names picked it up. All right. And so if it was a demographic problem, long story short, I would expect that Holy Names and St. Xavier would be going the same direction, but they're not. They're going opposite directions. So that's long story short, but I think it's not the demographic explanation.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, great question so far. Thank you, everybody. Next is Sophia.
Hi there, and thank you so much. In terms of cost cutting, you showed us chart and suggested cost cutting, I believe in the academic support area. Is maybe what it was called. I don't remember
I
exactly.
think so. I said, yeah, I mean, that's one of the areas, but specifically the staff, those were business, that's going to be an institutional support. And what I said, IT, that's going to be academic support. So they're in both. Those
Okay,
two.
so that's business and IT, because I was a little confused because I would assume with our student population that more academic support would make sense.
Yeah.
However, what the students are reporting is that there's cuts to the services that actually help them, that they can't, they're not getting what they need.
Yeah, and that's actually, that was the same case here when I first told everybody, hey, we're really high on academic support and all this, and everybody's like, well, we don't have the services we need. It turned out they were there. It's just they're not the folks in that group that are like interacting with students, which is even worse, right? So, yeah. Again, the priority should be going to the jobs that are closest to the students, and a lot of times it's not happening.
Okay, great. Next up is Laura Grimshaw.
Thank you. My question is, you mentioned liquidity issues, that they were tight but available. Mills's line of credit will end in 2023, and it will not be able to renew it because their credit rating has dropped to the bottom of the sea. So they won't be able to borrow any more money.
Yeah.
And then they have bonds that are coming due in, I believe it is 2033, $30 million in bonds. And then they have all this required government work on their sewers. God knows what happens when you open a sewer, what it's going to be, more ADA work, all that. So they're claiming all these expenses, and they won't be able to get the cash they need.
Well, I mean, they should try. Have they tried? I mean, it's just pretty simple, right? I mean, try to issue some bonds. We have a really good financial markets in the United States, if you haven't noticed. Even somebody that has like no credit can borrow. So I find it very hard to believe that they can't get a line of credit. That's probably a lie. Second is they can issue a bond, do bonds and build buildings, right? Even if the interest rate's high, they can afford it. Just cut some costs, get your budget in line, and everything will take care of itself.
The contract they made with the government to do the ADA work, the sewer and the air quality work has to be done by the end of next year. So I think that's one of the things that, no, I thought that's what it said, but I know they've done some ADA work, but they haven't replaced the boilers or done the sewer work.
Sure.
Hi, this is Danny. Can I jump in on that?
Yes, Danny, you're next. So if you want to add something to
my head vehemently. I'm sorry, I found something online about their whole ADA thing that said that they got an extension already that gives them until 2026 for some of the work and 2020 for some of it. I need to find it again so I can post it, but they're saying, I guess they're saying a lot of things. They also drew that line of credit. They've had the current one for, I think, 5 years. I mean, they started that line of credit way after their rating dropped. So I do think they may be flat out lying.
But you're saying they're lying. I agree.
Yeah.
1 billion in debt. Yeah, they don't have a billion in debt. Yeah.
Danny, do you also have a question? Or Danny, did you have a question also?
Thanks. Yeah, I'm okay, I guess my question is, okay, I was also gonna add that the merger will definitely increase Northeastern's unrestricted funds more than 70.6 million.
Yeah.
I agree, but I want to say we got a price per square foot estimate for office buildings on big plots of land in Oakland, and at that price per square foot, Mills would be worth more than 3.1 billion.
Wow.
The land, and that's for no offense to my home city, but for shitty plots of land, which Mills.
I mean, that's why I wish our school would have bought you guys I mean, you would have to suffer through really bad board members, but at least we'd be more aligned with you guys. I mean, we're small. We have a bigger endowment than Northeastern. It's too bad.
So I also wanted to add that we hired Stefano Falcone, who gave us a beautiful assessment of what is happening financially, which also supports what Matt is saying. And what he said from his years and 30 years of experience is that all of our debt can be renegotiated. That is not a problem. And that is what he said directly to us. So I just wanted to point that out.
What is the actual bond rating? I haven't checked it. I should probably check that. That's one place where you can find some more information is from Moody's. I didn't check that report though.
Great
But,
question.
I mean, they've got, that's kind of silly though. So they're going to shock you. They have us like right above junk, but it's silly. I mean, there's zero chance we're going to default on our debt.
So next we have up is Abigail. I know we're at 11:31, so if people want to hang on, but we'll take Abigail next, and then I think we'll close. So Abigail, please.
Hi, I'm actually a current Mills student, so I really appreciate Matt being here and talking. I really appreciate all the insight, and I do agree, it's really interesting to hear about where a lot of the revenue is going, but me as a student, I don't see it. Like, our public safety is, in my opinion, horrible. So it's ridiculous that we're spending so much on it. And I guess my question is, as a student and for other students here, how can we do something to change this, or what could we, expect, or should we be worried in some way?
Yeah, so it took everybody at our school to save our academic programs. They were going to gut everything. They had this plan, they rolled it out, they're doing rah-rah in the media, all of that. What it took for us to stop it was the faculty, the students, and alumni all getting together and working in the same direction. So the students were vital in that. The students did their own no confidence vote in the administration. They held informational meetings constantly. They wrote in the school newspaper. They showed up to board members with protest signs. I mean, they did a lot of stuff, and we couldn't have done it without them. I mean, it really required everybody to, you're talking about telling billionaires what to do on our board. They don't want to listen to anybody. It's like the worst combination of confidence and incompetence at the same time. Like, they think they're super smart about what they're doing, but they're actually not. But they think they're doing a great job. So it's a really difficult thing to overcome. It took everybody. I mean, I did radio interviews. I got yelled at for that. I did paper. I mean, we did everything. You can just do a Google search and probably find 100 different things that faculty and students wrote that are still out there on the internet.
Okay, let's keep taking questions because I haven't lost anybody here yet. So thank you everybody for hanging in there. We really want to get all your questions answered. So Sakura, I think hopefully I said your name right. You're up next, please.
My question is, Matt, why do you think that Mills College's administration is pitching this? Why do you think they would announce the closure of the college plus this very strange congruent merger? Like, I don't get it. What do you think is behind it?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know Mills. I don't know them personally, but I'll just tell you from my experience. I think there's a lot of people at my school that thought there's a conspiracy going on and that this must have been like coordinated. Honestly, I think in the end, it was just incompetence and a lack of willingness to be honest about what's happening and admit that they don't know how to fix it. And so that to them was worse than actually destroying the place. Right. So that's what they did, or they tried. We stopped.
Okay.
So I think it's incompetence, but there could be some other stuff. I mean, it's kind of odd that, you wouldn't renegotiate your food contract when you have lost so many students. That's just bizarre. And then the food contract is in a company that's based in Oakland. That to me was like, this seems odd, right? I mean, is there somebody on the board of this company or we have something similar happening right now with Noodle. The chief negotiator on our board for the noodle contractor who really wants noodle, it's losing millions, is a huge investor in noodle. I mean, how does that happen? And so this is what we're dealing with still. I mean, this has been going on for 2.5 years. So I wouldn't be shocked if that was also happening at Mills.
Okay,
Thank
Priya, you're up next. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Matt, for doing this. I mean, this is an incredible, information, and it supports what, Cynthia talked about earlier from when we had the accountant look it up. My question was, you were comparing Mills to Holy Names, which makes sense on so many levels, the fact that it's right there. Early in when all this started, we'd ask questions about how Holy Names, St. Mary's, and Dominican University, which are, small Catholic schools in the Bay Area, are surviving. And Notre Dame recently downsized. They basically eliminated their undergrad program and kept their grad program. They were going to completely shut down as well. And they survived. So we were told, and I don't know if this is true, that of course, they all happen to be Catholic colleges. Do Catholic colleges receive some funding from the church or some religious organization that we're not aware of? That's what we were told by the school.
They wish. I mean, St. Xavier is one. They're turning a huge profit, which is, they think they're a for-profit again. That's the problem, but they're turning a huge profit with zero endowment. I mean, you can do it. You just have to keep your costs within your revenue. It's not like rocket science. They're not getting money from the church. No. And I don't know if I mentioned that, emphasize this enough. The high expenses at Mills that aren't explained by the cost of living, obviously, because we compared to Holy Names, and Mills is actually not paying a competitive salary even compared to Holy Names.
Okay, I think Kieran had a question. So Kieran, can you unmute yourself?
Hey, Matt. Yeah, I just was wondering what your thoughts are on the NU international expansion model at this time economically. We talked about that a little bit, but what that also, if you had any thoughts on the longer term viability of NU's co-op program, which they make a big deal about, which is basically paid internships is constituting about half of your college education. I just wondered what you thought about that in terms of the overall scheme of higher ed, and what it might mean at Mills.
Yeah, I haven't really thought about that part. I mean, I just don't like the model. And it's interesting, like they'll say things like, oh, they want to keep the cost of education low. Well, Northeastern is one of the main drivers for how much college debt we're having in this country. Their model is what's causing it. They're expanding beyond their revenue from non-tuition sources is tiny, and it's creating this problem. So I honestly don't know what to think of Northeastern other than my initial gut instinct at the moment is that I don't like what they're doing. And I think I need to learn more about them very quickly before they try swallowing up more schools and turning them into for-profit institutions. But I'm going to do some work on that. I mean, I really expect I'm going to be doing this the rest of my career. It's really like small wins here or there, mostly getting yelled at. And, I'm just going to keep doing this as long as I can.
Okay, the next hand is Danny.
Hey, I saw how incredibly high per student the auxiliary enterprises costs were. I know our food service contract is huge, but we've had that for 15 years.
Yeah.
And it looked like it spiked, I don't know.
Yeah, it just could be let me check. It could be just the per unit. Remember, those are expressed in per unit, per student. Let me just check really quick. Auxiliary enterprises, and then just do the raw. Yeah, it's actually gone down a little bit, but on a per student basis, it's higher. But again, if you take Northeastern out, it's really high. It's still way above where it should be. $1.5 million. That's the food contract. It really is. It's the difference.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to take one last hand just because we are over time now, and it appears because we have so much great engagement that maybe we need to do another session. So we will consider that. Sarah, you have the next hand up. So we need to unmute Sarah, please. Sarah Terrell, there we go.
Yes, there we go, thanks. It was having a glitch there. So I'll try to be quick about this. You were saying that Northeastern, gets primarily income from tuition, not from endowments. But what I've been hearing on the various Facebook pages is that Northeastern students are going to be coming to Mills and paying basically nothing. So I was wondering how that works.
Well, I mean, that'd be nice if they did that for the students, of course. I mean,
well, the current Mills students don't appreciate it.
Oh, right. Oh, so I see what you're saying. They're going to transfer in. All right, I see. Yeah.
I'm not sure the details. I just hear
yeah,
they're not paying
the whole
anything,
financial...
and we're doing GoFundMes to try and finish our college education.
Right.
That's what I hear from current Mills students.
Yeah, let me clarify a little bit. I think they did a promotional offer for their spring program. I forget what it's called. And they offered free room and board for this session. So they're trying to promote, getting them here. And free room and board really just translates to a discount on the overall cost.
Yeah.
And so that's what they're doing. So you take their whole cost, tuition plus room and board, and then say, oh, well, you don't have to pay for room and board. You still have to pay a pile of money and, here. So.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that worries me the most is if it's true, what I'm thinking is true. I just saw somebody posted something yesterday on Facebook about how they announced again that the endowment will be used for the Mills Institute. For me, that's very concerning because it sounds then like the endowment won't be used for the school part, which means Northeastern at Mills or Mills at Northeastern, whatever it's called, is going to have to charge $10,000 more just to be breaking even with where it is right now in revenue per student. But, of course, Northeastern is not going to let Mills run at a deficit. So it's probably going to be meaning that your students are going to have to pay like $20K more per year, which is really sad because that means you're getting a totally different type of student, totally different kind of program. I mean, I don't know a lot of folks that will pay that much to go to, studying some niche topic, right? That's not related to engineering or some high paying job, right? I mean, that's just the economics of it.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Matt. This was really incredible. I've had many conversations with you over the months, and I learned a ton today. I just keep learning as we continue to talk, and I'm absolutely serious. If Matt has the time, and I know he's passionate about this, I think we should probably do another session. So we will talk to our Save Mills crew about that once we get off of this meeting. I did get a private message. Somebody asked me about the deal with Northeastern. Is that a done deal? Is it not? And the reality is that Rob Bonta can still intervene. There's still a fight to be had. If you can help us financially in any way, call all your friends and help us. There's a donate button on our website. There are all of our newsletters. If you haven't been getting them, there's a ton of information in there. You can also read a summary of what Stefano said on our website. We did a press release with a lot of great information there. I also just want to let you know, again, if you need the newsletter, you can sign up for it on our website. We'd love to have the information got out to as many people as possible. We think this information is invaluable. Please continue the fight of emailing the Board of Governors to support them in their fight. As many legal actions as possible is actually what helped Sweetbriar win in the end. I think they had 5 legal actions total. Also, please email the AG, Rob Bonta, and our governor and tell them they need to intervene. We have a lot of incredible information that is telling us all that the school can be saved, and we're counting on them to step in, particularly Rob Bonta. With that, we'll unmute everybody as we say our farewells, but we're just so incredibly grateful to all of you for your unrelenting support, your hard work, and we love you all, and you Millsies are just in all of our hearts. Thank you so much, and we hope you have an incredible weekend. And please don't hesitate to reach out to myself or anybody else that is on our board.